Agustin Rosanti Syukur from 1A English Department. This assignment is to fulfill the final semester exam project for Introduction to Literature course. So without any further ado, let's get started. The first subject is poetry. We read the poem and the title is Hope. Hope is Sabulgutan. He flips open the fair and yet inspected closely whether abstain is there. He is the helicon table that never see but one, and whatsoever it's consumed the same amounts remain. And next is I will tell you guys about short biography Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson was born on December 10, 1830 in Amherst, Massachusetts. She attended Mount Holyoke Female Seminary in South Hadley, but only for 1 year. Her father, Edward Dickinson, was actively involved in state and national politics, serving in Congress for 1 term. Her brother Austin, who attended law school and became an attorney, Dickinson's poetry was heavily influenced by the metaphysical thought of 17th century England, as well as her reading of the Book of Revelation and her upbringing in a Puritan New England town, which encouraged a Calvinist, Orthodox, and conservative approach to Christianity. The first volume of her work was published posthumously in 1870 and last in 1955. She died in Amherst in 1886. Upon her death, the ancient family discovered 40 bound volume of nearly 100,008 volume of fascicle, as they are sometimes called. Dickinson assembled the booklet by folding and sewing 5 or 6 sheets of stationery paper and copying what seemed to be final portion of poem. The handwritten poems show a variety of dash-like marks of various size and direction, or some are even vertical. The manuscript books of Emily Dickinson, or Bethlehem Press in 1981, is the only volume that keeps the order intact. Next is analysis of her poem. Hope is the thing with feather, is kind of hymn or praise with written to honor the human ability to hope using extant metaphors. The poem describes hope as a bird living in the human soul. This bird sing come rain or shine, storm or storm, good times or bad. The poem argues that hope is magical and almost impossible to beat. Furthermore, hope never asks for anything in return. It costs nothing for people to maintain hope. By extension, then, hope is the thing with Peter. Implore its reader to make good use of hope and to see it as essential, deeply valuable part of themselves. And second subject is prose. This is short biography of Charles Dickens. I will tell you guys. Short biography of Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens was an English writer and social critic during his lifetimes. His work enjoying present poverty. He is now considered a literary genius because he created some of the world's best-known fictional character and is regarded as the greatest novelist of the Victorian era. His novels and short stories enjoy lasting popularity. Dickens was born on February 7, 1812 in Portsmouth on the southern coast in England. His father, John Dickens, was a naval crack who dreamed of becoming rich, and his mother, Elizabeth Barrow, aspired to be a teacher and school director, but the family's financial situation had grown worse because John Dickens used to spend money dangerously beyond the family's means. Consequently, John was sent to prison for theft in AD 24 when Charles was just 12 years old. After his father imprisonment, Charles Dickens left school to work in factory. Despite his lack of formal education, he edited a weekly journal for 20 years, wrote 15 novels, 5 novellas, hundreds of short stories, and non-fiction articles. Lectured and performed extensively, was an indefatigable letter writer, and campaigned vigorously for children's rights, education, and other social reform. Dickens' literary success began the 1836 serial publication of the Pickwick Paper. Within a few years, he had become an international literary celebrity, famous for his humor, satire, and keen observation of character and society. His novels, most published in monthly or weekly installment, pioneered the serial publication of narrative fiction, which became the dominant Victorian mode for novel publication. Charles Dickens died on June 9, 1870, of a stroke. He was buried in Poets Corner at Westminster Abbey. Thousands of mourners came to pay their respect at the grave and throw in flowers. Next is summary of novel Oliver Twist. Oliver Twist is story of young orphan Oliver and his attempt to stay good in a society that refused to help. Oliver is born in workhouse to a mother not known to anyone in the town. She dies right after giving birth to him, and he is sent to the Prosical orphanage where he and her other orphans are treated terribly and paid very little. When he turned 9, he is sent to the workhouse where again he and other are treated badly and practically starved. The other boys, unable to stand their anger any longer, decided to draw straw to choose who will have to go up and ask for more food. Oliver loses, and on the appointed day, after finishing his first serving of gruel, he goes up and asks for more. Mr. Bumble, the Beadle, and the board are outraged and decided they must get rid of the Oliver, presenting him to the practical undertaker by Mrs. Sowerberry. Is it not great there either? And after an attack on his mother, his memory, Oliver runs away. Oliver walks toward London when he is close. He is so weak he can barely continue, and he meets another boy named Jake Dawkins, or the Artful Dodger. The Dodger tells Oliver he can come with him to a place where a gentleman will give him a place to sleep and food for no rent. Oliver follows, and the Dodger takes him to an apartment in London where he meets Piggin, the aforementioned gentleman, and Oliver is offered a place to stay. Oliver eventually learned that Pagans' boys are all pickpockets and thieves, but not until he is wrongfully accused of the crime of stealing an old gentleman's handcraft. He is arrested by the book, uh, but the bookseller comes just in time to the court and say that he saw that Oliver did not do it. The gentleman whose handcraft was taken as a bundle feels bad for Oliver and takes him in. Oliver is very happy with Mr. Bungo, but Fagin and his CO conspiration are not happy to have lost Oliver, who may give away her hiding place. So one day, when Mr. Bungo entrusts Oliver to return some book to the bookseller for him, Nancy spoils Oliver and kidnaps him, taking him back to Fagin. Oliver is forced to go on house-breaking excursion with the intimidating Bill Sykes. At gunpoint, Oliver entered the house with the plan to wake just within, but before he can, he is shot by one of the servants. Sykes and his partner escape, leaving Oliver in the ditch. The next morning, Oliver makes it back to the house, where his kind of owner, Mrs. Miley, and her beautiful niece, Prose, decided to protect him from the police and nurse him back to the health. Oliver slowly recovers and is extremely happy and grateful to be with such kind of generous people, who in turn are ecstatic to find that Oliver is such a good-natured boy. When he is well enough, they take him to see Mr. Bondo, but they find his house is empty. He has moved to the West Indies. Meanwhile, Pagan and his mysterious partner, monks, have not given up finding Oliver, and one day, Oliver wakens from a nightmare to find them staring at him through his window. He raised the alarm, but they escape. Nancy, after hiring Pagan and monks, decided that she must go to Rose Maylie to tell her what she knows. But she does, telling Rose what Monk is Oliver's half-brother who has been trying to destroy Oliver is so that he can keep his whole entrance but but that she will not betray Pagan or Sykes. Rose tells Mr. Bonlow, who tells Oliver other they might need Nancy again to find out how to find most. They meet her on London Bridge in a pre-arranged time, but Pagan has become suspicious and has sent his new boy, Noah Claypole, to spy on Nancy. Nancy tells Rose and Mr. Bonlow how to find most, but still refuses to betray Pagan and Sykes or go with them. Noah reports everything to Pagan, who tells Sykes, knowing full well that Sykes will kill Nancy. He does. Mr. Bolno has in the meantime found Mux, who finally admit everything that he has done, and the true case of Oliver birth. Sykes is on the run, but all of the London is an uproar and he eventually hanged himself, essentially in falling off a roof while trying to escape from the mob surrounding him. Pagan is arrested and tried, and after visit from Oliver is executed, Oliver, Mr. Bonlow, and Molly end up living in peace and comfort in a small village in the England countryside. Next, I will tell you guys all the character in this novel. The first is Oliver Twist. Oliver is a young god-heart and kind but often mistreated orphan who is raised in the workhouse and find himself in the tour to an undertaker living with the thieves and eventually taken in by the kind Mr. Bonlow and Mrs. Smiley. His generosity of spirit is total, and even when the faced with serious treatment, he never loses his sense of morality or kindness. And the second is Pagan, is very old man with a villainous looking and repulsive face. Pagan is the leader of a gang of boy types and a very greedy, ambitious man. Is Pagan who tried to turn Oliver into a thief and who betrayed Nancy to Sykes, leading to her death. And the third is Mr. Bonlow. Mr. Bonlow is very respectable looking elderly gentleman who has had his heart broken many times, including losing his finance on the day that they wedding. He takes a liking to Oliver even after suspecting him to spelling his handkerchief and taking him in, doing everything he can help him. And next is Nancy. Nancy is a young woman and prostitute raised into the professional by Pagan. Nancy eventually betrays Pagan and Syke to save Oliver, but she will not leave him and pay her life for dedication. Bill Sykes, a solidly built a man in his 20s. Bill is a vicious housebreaker and type who often work with Pagan and is involved with Nancy. He often mistreat and eventually kill her. Rose Maylie. Rose is Mrs. Maylie Nice, a beautiful 17-year-old woman who is both intelligent and perfectly kind. He is an orphan who is taken by Mrs. Maylie and ends up marrying Harry. Mr. Bumble. Mr. Bumble is the battle of the parish as a fat and choleric man who take great joy in the bushing those below him and is often offended by their imposition of him. And next is Edward Leopold. Edward is Oliver's half-brother who goes by the alias Monks for most of the novel. He offers to pay Pagan to court Oliver so that may have Oliver inheritance. He is in late 20s but hungry in appearance with extremely deep set eyes and super trumpets. And next is Mrs. Maylie. Mrs. Maylie is an older lady who, despite her age, is very dignified and stately. She is the owner of the mansion that Sykes and Crackit attempt to rob, the mother of Harry Maylie and the adopt aunt of Rosie Maylie. In her kindness, she takes Oliver in. Next is Joe Dawkins. Joe Dawkins is better known as the old bulldozer. He is common looking enough, but with the air and manner of a man. Although he is about Oliver age, he is Pagan's best pickpocket, and it is he who finds Oliver and lead him to London and to Pagan Place. Next is Charlie Bates. Charlie Bates is sprightly young friend of the Doger and another of Pigeon Boy. He is very excitable and loud often other than Oliver. He is the only who pagan boys to end up making an honest living. Next is Mrs. Corney. Mrs. Corney, later Mrs. Bumble, is the matron of the workhouse as which Oliver was born. She has been a widow of 25 years and end up marrying, dominating, and humiliating Mr. Bumble. Next is Mr. Looseburn. Mr. Looseburn is the doctor who tends to Oliver after the shooting and eccentric, kind, hearty, and bad gentleman who often act without forethought, but is universally liked. He agree to help the ladies try to protect Oliver. Next is Mr. Bedouin. Mr. Bedouin is Mr. Bonlow's housekeeper. He is a kind, motherly old lady who take care of Oliver in his illness and never dub his honesty even when he disappear with Mr. Bonlow books and money. Next is Mr. Grimwig. Mr. Grimwig is an old friend of Mr. Bonlow who is a little rude in manner but a worthy man. He is thought old gentleman who talks something like a parrot and has a strong taste of contradiction and threatening to eat his own head. Next is Noah Claypool. Noah is a charity boy with a fierce look who worked for Undertaker and enjoyed bullying Oliver. He later with Charlotte steals from the Sowerberry and runs away to London where he joined Pagan's gang. Next is Harry Maylie. Harry is Mrs. Maylie's son. He is about 25. He has a frank and had some pace and an easy demeanor and is deeply in love with Rose. Although the first ambitious, he chooses to become a country cleric so that he will be on Rose's level and she will agree to marry him. Next is Mr. Giles. Mr. Giles is a raider padman who works as butler and steward to Mrs. Maylie. He shot Oliver during the robbery, which he is at first of very proud of, then very guilty about. Next is Toby Crackit, Bill Sykes' partner in crime. Toby is known for his flash shines and ability to seduce servants into helping him and Sykes break in. Next is Mr. Sowerberry. Mr. Sowerberry is the parochial undertaker, a tall and gaunt man who take Oliver on as an entertained servant. He rather likes Oliver but cannot stand up to his wife, Heather, of the orphan. Next is Mrs. Sowerberry. Mrs. Sowerberry is the undertaker's wife, a short, thin woman with a facetious countenance who has strong dislike for Oliver and treats him accordingly. Next is Mr. Bridle. Mr. Bridle is a short and hiply man who has worked for Mr. Maylie since he was a child as a lad of work. Everyone in the household still consider him a boy, although he is in his 30s. Next is Barney. Barney is the waiter at the Three Cripples. He has very nasal voice and also worked for Toby Crackit. Next is Charlotte, the Salisbury servant. Charlotte will do anything for Noah Claypole, including stealing 20 pounds from the Sowerberry and running away to London. Next is Tom Chetling, another of Pageant's boy. Chetling is 18 but not as accomplished a thief as a doger and has just come from spending 6 weeks in jail. Next is Mr. Blatter. Mr. Blatter is an officer from Bow Street, a stout man about 50 who come to Mrs. Miley's after the robbery. Next is Mr. Duff. Mr. Duff is an officer from Bow Street, a red-headed, bony man with a sinister expression who come to Mrs. Miley after the robbery. Next is Dick. Dick is a young companion of Oliver at the workhouse who blesses Oliver as he runs away from the Undertaker. Dick's dies before Oliver can come back to save him. Next is Betsy. Betsy is a young woman prostitute who visits at Pagans. She is a little messy and not quite pretty, but free and easy hearty. She goes crazy when she sees Nancy's dead body. Next is Mrs. Munn. Mrs. Munn runs the orphanage where Oliver grows up. He kept for herself most of the money allotted by the parish for the care of the orphans and neglect them rather steadily. Mr. Stringami, also known as Old Sally, Mrs. Stringami as an old woman paper who acts a nurse during Oliver's delivery while having had a little too much beer. She steals a locket from Oliver's dead mother, which hold the key to his identity. Mr. Pang. Mr. Pang is the magistrate to whom Oliver is taken when accused of stealing an underhand crime. He is a lean, long-backed, stiff-necked, middle-sized, balding man with a stern and flushed face. The bookstall keeper. The bookstall keeper is the man who saw the robbing of Mr. Bolo and convinced Mr. Pang to drop the charge against Oliver. Mr. Kaggs. Mr. Kaggs is a 50-year-old robber and ex-convict with a scared face who is companion to Toby Crockett. Next is Mr. Gamfield. Mr. Gamfield is a chimney sweep who is dubbed his landlord and so intrigued by the workhouse offer of Oliver, and more importantly, Pye founds he is a very cruel man who has already caused by death of several young sinners with a pension to him. Mr. Lively. Mr. Lively is a mole man who works in Saffron Hill, buying and selling stolen goods. The Master. The Master is a fat, healthy man who is in charge of giving out the food at the workhouse. Next is Mr. Limkin. Mr. Limkin is a member of the board of the workhouse. And the third subject is drama. Uh, this is the summary of the Sorry Wrong Number based on the video that I watched. Sorry Wrong Number is a play written by Lucille Preacher in 1952. The main character is Mrs. Stevenson, an invalid who has been attempting to get in touch with her husband, who is working late. However, the line is busy and she ends up overhearing a phone conversation between a killer named George and his boss. They are discussing the specific of pending murder of a woman at 11:15 p.m. that same night. Mr. Stephenson attempts to get the call traced. The operator argues that her to contact the police, which she does. The police can only say that will check into things. Mr. Stephenson then learned that her husband will not be home at the evening. She realizes that she is intent murder victim. She desperately tries to get back in touch with the police, but she is too late. The murderer is already in the house and listening in the call. Just before she is connected to police, Mrs. Stephenson is murdered. And here's some question about Sorry Wrong Number, and I will answer too. The first question is, where does Mrs. Stephenson suddenly go away to a business trip? The answer is Boston. Second is, what does Mr. Stephenson overhear on the phone when trying to contact her husband? The answer is, she heard two men discussing a murder plot. And the third is, in what city does the place take place? The answer is New York City. And the last question, what is the primary motivation for Mr. Stephenson killer? The answer is seasick, high maintenance, and pussy. I think that's enough for all the materials that I explained. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm very sorry if I had a mistake. See you guys again. Bye.